want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up. Go!
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
It's another Tuesday in Paradise. That would be, well, there is a Paradise, Michigan, if you didn't know, but we're not in Paradise, Michigan. We're in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, and that is the headquarters of the Knee Jerks, Detroit Sports Talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the biggest cynic I know, and that would be Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog, and he'll tell you where you can find all his fun stuff. Greg, we have lots to talk about since a lot's gone down in the last couple of weeks, especially Lions-wise.
I prefer the word realist, Al, but you're right. I am cynical for sure when it comes to the Lions. That's for sure. I am Greg, from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. Thanks for reading me. If you do, every Monday I pretty much have a piece. I did a piece yesterday about the Lions' weird offense and defense dynamic, and it reminded me of the Giants of the 1950s. Check that out. Also, follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. We have a special guest tonight. Yes, we've been rolling with the guests every show here pretty much, and this time this is no exception. We are going to be joined tonight by Ron Mott of Sportsopoly. Ron was with us at the top of the year talking about Sportsopoly. At that time, we were kind of picking his brain about how he was doing with the new endeavor. He left his position in the news.
Yeah, and to tell the listeners, it's a sports newsletter. Essentially, he's a columnist. Yeah. Essentially,
right? Really, yes. Essentially, he's a one-man band, as he said. You'll hear that in the interview. So Ron was kind enough to kind of do this within a 24-hour time frame. He wrote a piece on the Lions that I thought was really interesting. So I asked him to come on the show and defend it, and that's what he's going to do tonight. And that runs kind of long, so we'll kind of compress the rest of our topics. We've got some Tigers to talk about with Miguel Cabrera. We've got some Pistons go. Although we may leave the Pistons go until the 18th when we bring City Hall on. City's going to join us on the occasion of opening night in the NBA, right? 2 weeks from tonight. So we'll talk to him about that. And what else has Al got cooking here? He's a little bit. A
lot of Lions, essentially. A lot of Lions. Yeah.
Sure. But before we do any of that, let's play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how I play this game by now. I'll give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he'll receive a handsome coffee table book, The Colorful History of Edgewater Park.
Oh boy, that's a deep cut. That's deeper than Boblo or
yes, it is.
Edgewater. I never went to Edgewater Park. I remember seeing the ads when I was a kid, but never went to Edgewater Park. I think that was a little too. Oh, we were. Plus, I grew up closer to Toledo,
right,
than Detroit, so we just went to Cedar Point, which is like the most awesome park in the world. Now, let's go to my grave. That Cedar Point. If you want to go to a theme park, go to Cedar Point. Love that place. Even to this day, Cedar Point's great. Regardless of all that, as I went off on a tangent, Edgewater Park. That was an very old school amusement park. Was it like on the outskirts of Detroit, if I remember right?
If I remember correctly, it was Telegraph and 8 Mile Road.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tells you how things have changed. But actually, that is a good idea for a book, Greg. You need to get on that. I expect your first draft when I win this. So.
Well, before we get to that first draft of the book, let's give some clues here. This person made his name in the world of baseball. He was born in this state in 1944. He's still with us. Not much of a player, I will say that, but much more famous after his playing career. He is, without question, one of the most well-known and decorated individuals of his in his profession, if you will. And he continues to do it. And he is 78 years old today.
78 years old. Decorated, as you said. He's still in the game, you're saying.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
All right. I want to say Tony La Russa, because he retired today, and he would be around it. Let's just write Tony La Russa.
Oh, I didn't. First of all, you're right.
Yes.
It is Tony La Russa. I did not know he retired today.
Well, he did yesterday. He because he's been missing from the dugout for health reasons.
Been sick.
Yeah,
right.
And it's been announced that he is not returning. He is done. Because I almost went Dusty Baker, but I think he's a little younger than that. Yeah. So,
but not much.
Not by much.
Dusty would have been a good one. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, good. I mean, good that you got it. I didn't know that he.
Yeah. I thought that's why it would be La Russa because of his announcement, but. God damn it, Greg! I'm disappointed in you for not knowing that. I thought you were going to tie it in with your questions.
I just got lucky. Leave it to La Russa to retire right around his birthday. But Tony La Russa is 78 years old today, and a kind of an odd hire by the White Sox.
Very odd hire.
But now they're looking for another manager, and now they can't have A.J. Hinch. Right. They should have had a couple of years ago. Okay, so good for you. You get the coffee table book, The Colorful History of Edgewater Park. Good for you.
Colorful. I'm sure it is very colorful. All right. With that, we need to. We have one. Actually, it looks like we have a new recurring guest because this would be his second appearance on the show, and we had a really nice chat. So, Greg, if you get out the introductions to Ron Mott.
Yeah, let's play that interview. Ron Mott from Sportsopoly. He was kind enough to join us, and we'll play that for you right now. Ron Mott is a friend of the Knee Jerks. He was with us, I believe, at the top of the year, talking about Sportsopoly and his at the time, which was a fairly new endeavor for him, switching back to his roots as a sports guy after having done many years in the news, doing the news for NBC and others, and decided to get back to his passion of sports. And we talked with him about Sportsopoly and about his Substack and some of his takes on what was going on at the time. So what happened was, Al, that Ron wrote a piece on Sportsopoly, the link of which we will put in the show notes for folks, and that I tweeted out as well, where he talked about the Lions, and he came at it from a much different perspective, of course, than you and I would come at it as being jaded old crotchety guys. Get off my lawn, guys. And so he came at it with a different, fresh perspective as an outsider, much more upbeat. And he's on the other end of our line right now. Ron, thanks for being here, my friend.
Happy to be with you guys again. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it. It's nice the timing is great. You did the piece. It came out the other day. And it's actually, it's called, I'll read the title. It's called Lovable Losers, Lions on Brand More Than Ever. And in the piece, Ron kind of takes us through the first 4 games of this season and also the first year and 4 games of the Dan Campbell at Holmes era, and how Ron thinks that even though the Lions are still losing, that they're doing it in a much more exciting way, and that he feels like they're building something tangible in Detroit. And so he and I went back and forth via email yesterday, and I was giving him my jaded viewpoint. So I said, hey, why don't you come on the show and talk about it? He said, sure. So he's here. And, first I guess I'd ask you, Ron, what was the impetus behind the piece? Was it that you had seen the game against the Seahawks, or you noticed the score, or have you been watching the team? What was the impetus behind writing the piece to begin with?
Well, first of all, I'm stunned at how proficient and efficient the offense has been, and I've been, they've been on my radar to do something on the Lions here in the early part of the season, because I'm thinking something is happening there. Now, I know the folks in and around Detroit have a much different perspective, given all that you guys have been through over the decades with this franchise. But I'm liking, as an outsider, what I'm seeing. I like the spirit that Dan Campbell has brought into the building. I was a little worried, quite frankly, when he got hired at his introductory press conference was talking about chewing on body parts and the like. And I thought, oh my Lord, what have they hired in Detroit? But the energy and the passion that he's brought to the sidelines, you can tell. I mean, I watch a lot of football and have covered the league and worked in the league for almost 40 years. And so I see the germination of something special happening in Detroit. I don't think it's going to happen this year, maybe not even next year, but within the next 2 or 3 years, I think this team is going to be a real competitor in the NFC North. Particularly when number 12 in Green Bay decides to go do something else for a living. I think the foundation is there. You got a youngish quarterback who's got some experience under his wings, and Jared Goff, he's playing well this year. And unlike Indianapolis with their situation, they couldn't wait to get rid of Carson Wentz and blame everything that happened to them last year on him. And then they bring in an old guy who is looking every bit of 37 years old in Matt Ryan. You guys have something to build around in Jared Goff, and some of the backfield is great. Williams and DeAndre Swift. I just like what I see, and being an outsider looking in at Detroit, I'm like, man, this is a fun team to watch. Now, granted, I haven't watched their games from start to finish because I do the red zone on Sunday, so I'm trying to check out all the teams as much as I can. But I keep seeing these Detroit scores, and I'm like, what's going on up there? And then we started talking about the defense, which is obviously a little more serious subject. But I like it. I mean, I like what they're doing. I hope that Dan is able to survive the quick trigger that the organization has had over the years to actually build a new culture there, because that's what's needed in Detroit. They've had good pieces come and go through that program. You need to stick with a coach that you believe in, and I think this is a guy you can rally around, even though maybe the town is split on whether he's the right person for the job. But they're fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do there the rest of the way.
Let's talk about Campbell for a moment, because I call him Meathead. I've called him. It's basically my nickname. I don't even refer to my name anymore. I just call him Meathead on Twitter and so forth. And you told me, you said, well, gee, Greg, Ditka was a meathead, and I said, well, yeah, but that's one example in the 100 and some odd year history of the NFL. And I know that this whole idea of wearing your heart on your sleeve, and he cares and he cries sometimes, and he's got these passionate, emotional speeches. At what point? And I wrote a piece as early as last year around this time, saying that don't worry, the fans will turn on him as well. And they did. They went 0-8-1 or something like that to start the season last year. At what point do you stop putting stock, Ron, into the emotional aspect and the rah-rah aspect of Campbell, and start to really look at this guy from an X's and O's standpoint, where he to me falls woefully short?
Well, two things. One, I think when you see players quit on a coach, that is the first signal that the coach is not right for the organization. He has found a way in a franchise with a losing legacy to get buy-in from these young players and some of these veteran players to play 60 minutes. And there needs to be a lot of weight put on that, Greg and Al, because when I was with the Chiefs almost 40 years ago, gosh, I can't believe it's been that long, in the mid to late 80s, and we were not very good at all. I mean, we were bad. We were a bad football team. With the right culture, we had a great owner and really good pieces in place in the front office, and we had some decent talent on the field, but we were losers. And we had some players come in who were losers and never had a winner's mentality, quit on the team, halfway through the season. And it was ugly. It's not a pleasant situation to be around when you've got players who are just showing up and going through the motions. So Campbell has that going for him. Now, in terms of X's and O's, I've always felt that head coaches, don't need to be, X's and O's experts. They need to be good managers of coaches. And that's what their job is not to know it all, but to know enough about each aspect of running that football team to hire the right people, to get the philosophy in place that they believe in, and get all those pieces to gel together. Now, I don't know what sort of, friction there may be developing between Campbell and Glenn with the defense and all the problems they got on that side of the ball. But I don't need Dan Campbell to be, Bill Belichick. who's a mad scientist who gets every intricacy of this game. I don't need that in a head coach. I mean, Bill is incomparable in terms of his prowess and his knowledge of football and just scheming. I want a head coach who can manage his staff and manage the game. And if he does that well, they're going to have success in Detroit. I hope it's with him because I like his personality. I like the fire that he brings. He's passionate, man. And when they dropped those first 5 games last year, and he's got up to the podium and broke down. I mean, I was so touched by that. I'm like, I'm a fan of this guy for the rest of his football coaching career, because rarely, if ever, have I seen a coach bring out his real emotion after a loss in the early part of a season. You would have thought that they would have lost a championship game or something. He was that devastated by watching his players go out and fight hard for 60 minutes, played every play, didn't take a play off, and they fell short in that game. Should have won it probably. And it hurts when you lose like that in this league, and you spend all that time during the week and all those months in, OTAs and training camp. And it means a lot to you on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays when you do everything that you can do. You executed everything as perfectly as you could, and you still come up short. And that hurts. And I like that about him. So I think you guys ought to give him a little bit of a palm frond and let him be the meathead if you think that's what he is. But if that meathead starts winning, you're going to love that meathead.
Well, you talked about managing coaches and managing the game, which the latter is, I think, the issue that certainly that I have with him, because he's come up so many times, Ron, in the 21 games he's coached here, where he's made some really perplexing decisions. And don't forget, he coached 12 games in Miami back in, I think, 2015 or whatever, when he did it at interim. He won 5 games. I mean, won 5 out of 12 in a difficult situation, as you know. It's never easy to come in as an interim coach, never, because whenever that happens, the situation is bad, or else you wouldn't be there. So I do give him credit for that. He won 5 out of 12 games in Miami under a difficult scenario, first time he'd ever been a head coach. But he just seems to me to be regressing. Let's bring Big Al in and see what he thinks. So we're talking with Ron Mott, by the way, of Sportsopoly. You can follow him on Twitter at Ron Mott, oddly enough. And also you can follow Sportsopoly at Sportsopoly. Let's bring Big Al into the equation. What you got for Ron Mott?
Well, yeah, Greg knows I'm a bit more of a Campbell apologist. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but Ron, Campbell's really probably the poster boy of a player's coach. And as they say in the NFL, in most pro leagues, it's a player's league, like the NBA, the NFL can say the same thing. Do you think that a guy like Campbell, you think he might be the, especially if he's successful, that we might see more of these outright wear your heart on your sleeve players type coaches rather than the disciplinarians, which really seem to be legendary in the past, in the NFL's past?
I mean, I do. I mean, I think you look at someone, like a Sean McVay, brilliant offensive mind. He's kind of a rah-rah coach. His players gravitate toward his personality. They like that fire and energy he brings to the building. It's a far different approach to coaching than we saw in the old days, in the 70s, the 80s, the Tom Landrys, the Bud Grants, the Chuck Knowles. Those guys it's just a different era. So I think to relate to today's players, you've got to bring the passion that those players are bringing to work every day. It can't be I'm your boss and you're going to do what I say and it's my way or the highway. That doesn't really work in professional sports anymore. You got to get buy-in. You're partners. You're collaborating together. You are a team. And not so much sort of a boss-employee relationship. And I think the Campbell approach. I mean, first of all, winning. You got to win. Right. But short of that, you've got to get buy-in from the players on the culture you're trying to establish. And it is very hard. I mean, coming from the Chiefs in the late 80s before we all got blown out of there and they brought in some real professionals, and then they started winning. You have to change the culture inside the building before you can get on the field. You have to create a culture of winning and what that entails. That means you bring in players who are going to be serious about being professional. You want players who are going to go home and not run off to the bar, but they're going to go home and watch some more film. They're going to come back to work the next day with a little more energy, and those position coaches and the head coach see that, and then they thrive off of that. And the next thing you know, you got full buy-in, and you've got guys who are going to go play 60 minutes, even when you're 3-12-1 at the end of the season, and you've got the last game coming up, and most guys want to quit. You want to see guys play 60 minutes of hard football, and I think Campbell's the kind of guy that can do that. The scheming and all of that is secondary to establishing the culture. The culture has to come first. The schemes can come after the culture has been established, when you know that you've got the right mix of personnel and energy in the building to win. It's hard to win in the NFL. It is really, really hard. And I think, Dan's got a good foundation. He's got the right personality to be successful. And now it's just a matter of executing and taking a look at things when they don't go as planned, and make the appropriate tweaks. I tell people all the time that being a head coach, it looks easy when we're all watching from our couches, but it is 3 hours of being an air traffic controller. It's just constant information coming into that coach's brain, and you're making split-second decisions, every minute. And it is a much tougher job than I think people give coaches credit for. And sometimes, they don't rise to the occasion late in games. They make bad decisions. Even the good to great coaches. John Harbaugh, perfect example on Sunday. So I think Detroit, and all those Pride fans out there, man, I mean, they should be, they should feel encouraged about what they're seeing on the field. The wins haven't come so far. It's early, but they've been in every game, and I think that's huge going forward.
I want to talk about that. We're talking with Ron Mott of Sportsopoly. Follow him on Twitter at Ron Mott, and follow Sportsopoly at Sportsopoly. I want to talk about that, Ron, because I was looking at the scores from Sunday's games, and none of them really surprised me, in the sense that so many of them were decided by one score. And when I say one score, I define one score as anything from 1 to 8 points. And so many games at any given Sunday, literally at any given Sunday, are decided by 1 to 8 points. It's really kind of fascinating. And so, you always see these stats that the networks will put on the Chiron, and they'll say, the Lions are, 2-6 in game, or the Lions of, let's put it this way, Lions of, there are 8 losses by combined, 26 points or something. Well, the NFL, that's just the way it is. I mean, every game is decided by it seems like, by 1 to 8 points, maybe 10. And you're right, that speaks to your point about it being difficult to win in the league. But my point is that I wouldn't put a lot of stock into losing 8 games by 26 points, because every NFL team loses 8 games by 26 points. That's the way it goes in the NFL. It's very close. So many games, as you've been around, have decided, by 1 or 2 plays, and the teams that make those plays are the teams that win and go to the playoffs. So my question to you is, you were talking about the culture in the winning, and I'm curious, is it a chicken or egg thing, in the sense that what comes first? Is it the culture that breeds winning, or is it the winning that breeds culture? Because this whole culture thing is kind of fascinating to me.
Well, winning, it can be fleeting. And so I have always been on the side of the coin that you got to get the culture stuff right first. You cannot win and sustain winning without the right culture in the building, because good players will come and go, and you'll have an anomaly here and there, and you might win 10 games one year, and you turn around the next 3 years and you win a total of 10 games.
Right.
So I think the culture has to be there, that the people you bring into that building realize that this is, you're gonna buy into this culture. You're not gonna be here, and we're gonna have a winning culture here. We're gonna take this job very seriously, and we want people here who care about their careers, not just coming in, getting 1 or 2 contracts and going off and retiring at 28 and being done with the game. We want people who are going to commit themselves fully to the business of professional football, and so I think that's what Detroit has not gotten right. And they've got to get that right before they can start thinking about winning and putting, successful winning seasons back to back to back. There is a lot of parity in the league, and the whole phrase "any given Sunday" it reigns true, especially now. I mean, you just take a look at the standings right now. I mean, you've got 23 out of 32 teams that are at 500 or better 4 weeks in. That's remarkable. And so I think I'm looking forward to that continuing throughout the rest of the season, because that means we might see some new, fresh, and which is when the real season starts in my book. But I do think that if Detroit can be patient, the front office, the ownership can be patient and allow Campbell and his staff, and he'll have to make changes, obviously, with some pieces here and there going forward. But if they're patient, I think he's the right guy. I wouldn't put him in the same category as some of the bigger, schematic minds in football. But like I said, I don't think you need that necessarily to win. And what his job is a little different than, say, Andy Reid's job or Belichick's job. Kyle Shanahan's job is, his job is to try to turn a culture upside down, to right the ship, if you will, while also trying to figure out, get players that are going to work within the system that he wants to push. So he's got a lot on his plate, and I just, yes, a lot of these games are, the 3-point, 4-point games, but the fact that Detroit, when they get down, they're not out. They still play hard, they still fight, and sometimes a 48-45 game isn't what it appears. You can have a 48-45 game and have that game completely one-sided. And so the scores aren't always reflective of the actual talent level, the skill, and the execution of a game. I think you have to watch to see the effort. And when I see players quit, man, it angers me, because it's a lot of work that these coaches put into the job that they have, and for players to quit on them, it's so offensive to me as a fan. And I haven't seen any shred of that in Detroit in the 21 games or whatever that Campbell has coached up there. So I'm excited for the city, man. I would like to see Detroit, get that gear, to stick finally and go on a little bit of a run here. You guys haven't had a playoff win in 31 years or something like that. So I think it's coming if people will be patient enough and let's say this season doesn't end the way you'd like. If you end up only winning 3 or 4 games, and the people will say, oh, there we go again. Here comes, another coach. I just think strongly about the fact that I think there's something there with him. He's got an intangible. It's hard to put a finger on it, but I think the guy's going to be a good coach for a long time in the league.
We're talking with Ron Mott here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Egan from WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and Big Al, I'll bring him in a second to ask another question of Ron. But the thing is, Ron, is that the NFL is literally set up to prevent you mentioned that 31-year drought with the playoff win. By the way, that's the only playoff win the Lions have had in 65 years, by the way. Okay, that's the first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, as Greg and I like to joke, we were young men when the Lions last won a playoff game. I'm 60 years old now. I was like 31 when they won that playoff game.
Okay, here's the thing.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The NFL is literally set up to prevent what is happening in Detroit from happening, which is they reward bad teams, as all leagues do, with high draft picks. They reward bad teams with weak schedules the year after. Year after year, it's set up. You made a good point earlier when you said that you can win 10 games one year and then go 3 years and win 10 games total. And that's the way that it's supposed to be. I mean, you're supposed to have these teams bobbing up and down, and that's just the way it is. And if you look at the history, so many teams have bobbed up and down multiple times, while the Lions have not even bobbed up, frankly. And it's amazing to me that in a league that's designed to prevent this from happening, it's still happening. And when you have one playoff win in 65, even my wife, who knows nothing about football, said to me the other day, how can they be so bad for so long? And she's coming at it from a completely fresh, uninformed perspective. And I don't even know what to say. I just say, well, bad management, the coach isn't right. She says, how can you have bad management for 60 years? And she's right. So I don't know what to say. I don't know how to answer that question, or I don't know how to explain it to somebody who comes at it without any sort of knowledge. So from your perspective, as somebody who's not a Detroiter, if you will, how does this happen? How does a team not be successful for decades in a league that's designed to prevent this from happening?
Well, and again, I mean, it is hard. Like I said to you, Greg, yesterday on Twitter or online or wherever we were chatting, it's hard to be down in the doldrums there as long as the Lions have been. It's hard to do because organically, because of the way the league is set up, you are supposed to be able to rise out of that cellar with those high draft picks and put something together every 10 years. Maybe have a good couple of seasons in there, and ebb and flow like the rest of the league. Like most of the league will come up, they'll have their good years, and then they'll kind of hit a valley, and they'll come back up and back down. It oscillates that way. And for Detroit, it's been sort of flatlined down toward the lower end of the barrel. And I don't quite understand it either, but I don't want to sound like a broken record. But I think it all goes back to establishing the culture in the building. You look at the Steelers. Now, they're going to have a tough year this year. They've had 3 coaches in their history. 3 in 62 years. So that's culture right there, guys. Mm-hmm. That is culture. They believe in stability within their organization, and it has reaped incredible rewards for them and the Rooney family. And so I think that's what is missing in Detroit, that you need to establish a culture of what is the identity of the Detroit Lions. I think the owners have to set that for the city and for themselves and for the players who they are bringing in, and the coaches and the personnel that they bring into the building. Everybody who gets hired at the Detroit Lions needs to understand what they're walking into, that this is a winning organization. And I'm going to bring my A game if I'm working in public relations or sales or ticketing or marketing. I'm bringing my A game because that's who we are. We are a winning organization. That is missing there. It was missing when I went to the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs had been to the Super Bowl in 1970. They went to the playoffs in 71, and we didn't snip another playoff until 86. Right. So it's 15 long years. Same, owner and a wonderful man. May you rest in peace, Lamar Hunt. They got the ship righted because they brought in the right mix of people again, because Lamar was kind of a hands-off owner. He let the people he hired run that organization, and he obviously knew he was the boss of bosses. But he always had the right culture in that organization. They just had some lean years, went through a lean stretch, and now for the past 32 years, I never thought, I'm from Kansas City, I never thought I'd see this team perform at this level that they have, had since about 1990. They've been outstanding. Mm-hmm. And so it all points back to establishing an identity, what you want to be, and you don't want to be labeled as a losing organization, and that's what the Lions are. But they have the power to change it, and it's a matter of whether they have the will to change it. I hope they do. I hope they do turn that around, Greg. I apologize.
No, it's okay. Let's bring Al back into the discussion. We're talking with Ron Mott, and Al, what you got for Ron?
Well, let's touch what's going on after 4 games so far. In the NFC, the Eagles seem to be the class of the league, at least so far. They're the only undefeated team left. And in the AFC, it's starting to look like it's the Bills and the Chiefs and then everybody else. And, and obviously the Bills and the Chiefs probably may have the 2 best quarterbacks in football right now. First off, I guess, are you buying into the Eagles as one of the Super Bowl favorites?
Absolutely. And I told people before the season, I said, do not sleep on Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Because I think if Jalen Hurts comes out and shows the talent that he really has, and he's done that through these first 4 games, they are going to be a tough out, man. I like what I see there. They I think, may have from top to bottom, I think the most complete roster in the league. And so long as they go out and they execute, they're going to be good. I mean, I think, beginning of the season, I thought, Dallas, we didn't know what to think about Dallas, and now I think we know what Dallas is. They are going to be another pretender for the rest of the way when their fans, bless their hearts, are just so delusional. But I think Philadelphia needs to be looked at. I was disappointed in the Rams last night. They got toasted. And maybe they can get, some of that offensive line, those problems fixed here in the next week or two, because they looked awful last night. San Francisco, I think, believe it or not, I mean, they they're a good football team, and we all knew that going in. I was a little down on Trey Lance and took a lot of heat from 49ers fans saying that they were going to, basically kiss away their future by handing the keys to this kid. And unfortunately, he got hurt. I don't have anything personal against him. I just don't think he's ready to be a starting NFL quarterback. But league wide, I mean, I'm just, like I said, I'm so excited about the parity that I see, because I think we're going to see some surprises reach the playoffs. AFC, Chiefs, Bills, yes. Baltimore gave a game away on Sunday. I think they're going to be around. They were actually my Super Bowl champion pick. I still believe that they have the potential to do that. Lamar, I'm telling you, he's balling, man. And I don't know if he's going to get the money he wants next spring, but that's a good football team. That's a good football team, and I think they'll be around. But so I would say Kansas City, Buffalo, 1A, and then you got Baltimore. You've got some other pieces in the AFC. My biggest disappointment really for the season is Indianapolis. What is going on there? I'm stunned. I mean, this is a team that I thought could make a deep run. They got a good defense, good offensive line. You got one of the best running backs in the league, and you got rid of the problem that you thought you had at quarterback, and you bring in this old guy. And he looks old, man. And I hope they get it corrected, because they're a good football team. They just haven't shown it this year, and I don't know what is going on there. But it's fun. I like the fact that you got Jacksonville on, tied for the division lead after 4 weeks. I mean, come on, this is great.
Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns real quick. I have a couple of friends who are from that area, and one of my friends is really, really down on the Browns for the way they handled the whole Baker Mayfield situation, bringing Deshaun Watson. What's your take on what's going on with Cleveland and the bringing in of Watson to begin with?
Well, I mean, I've been scratching my head this year about the whole situation with Deshaun. The stuff that he's been accused of doing is just so disturbing and beyond the pale. Right. And I hope for his sake, just from one human to another, that he actually appreciates that he may have a character flaw that needs some professional treatment, and I hope he takes that seriously and is not just going through the motions to get back on the football field and make all this money that the Haslams are paying him. He's a heck of a quarterback, though, guys. He's a top 5 NFL quarterback. He is that talented, and I don't necessarily fault Jimmy Haslam for going after him, because he's a game changer. He is leaps and bounds better at that position than Baker Mayfield, and I don't think anyone can argue that. The question is, they have so much talent on that football team. Sometimes when you have that much talent on a team, it's hard to get those egos to gel as a unit. And I love their coach. Stefanski. He's a winner. He knows what he's doing. They've got the right pieces in place in Cleveland, but it's Cleveland. And in some ways, they're sort of like the Lions in that they can't get out of their own way sometimes. Yeah. But I don't know what to expect the rest of the way with them. I mean, Brissett, he's a serviceable quarterback. I don't know what the landscape's going to look like come week 12 or 13 when Deshaun is eligible to return. They are I don't know, they're baffling to me, the Browns. You got one of the best 1-2 backfields and offensive backfields in football, and they just haven't put it together yet. And I think part of it is just that they're playing with a backup quarterback, and I think some of the players are just not they're like they're looking forward to November when they get the guy back. And so we'll see. I would be disappointed if I were a Browns fan, but at the same time, you have to look at what's happening in the division. It's really up for grabs. I think any of those, well, maybe not Pittsburgh, but Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Baltimore are all kind of on the same level. I mean, Baltimore, I think I would give them a leg or two up on the other two, but that division is for all practical purposes open. And so I would say if Cleveland can keep from totally flopping here over the next 7 or 8 weeks, they should be able to make a nice run, push at the end if Deshaun is fresh when he comes back.
We're talking with Ron Mott here on the Knee Jerks. We're going to wrap things up here in a second. But before we let you go, Ron, and by the way, you can follow him on Twitter at Ron Mott. Before we let you go, I do want to get your take on another team here in Detroit that's about ready to start its season, and that's the Pistons. There's a lot of excitement about the Pistons right now, with the young talent, with the off-season moves that Troy Weaver made. Just recently bringing in Bojan Bogdanovic. I'm probably butchering this pronunciation of that name, but to lend some experience and some three-point shooting. Dwayne Casey already loves the guy. He just thinks he's just, in fact, he called him a godsend the other day. This guy's a godsend to this team for what he brings in terms of leadership, the skill set that the Pistons lack, which is the three-point shooting, of course. What's your take on the Pistons? I mean, this is a team that is a very tough Eastern Conference, obviously. We don't necessarily think, even the most fervent Pistons fan, I don't think, thinks that the Pistons will necessarily make the playoffs this year. But what do you see this team making a stride forward?
I do, but I think the biggest hurdle is the fact that they're in the East, and the East is stacked, man. I mean, it's going to be hard for I mean, people have to be patient because you're 5, 6, 7 deep in the East of teams that are really strong, and Detroit's not at that level yet. And they're trying to here in Chicago. I mean, the Bulls showed some promise last year. They're clawing to try to get back, and they've got some good pieces in place, but I don't think they're ready for that upper echelon of the Eastern Conference. So I think people have to be patient with what they're doing up in Detroit. I like it. I mean, I think they I could see them winning a handful of games more than they did last year. Mm-hmm. But it's a tough road to hoe when you've got the Brooklyns and the Miamis and the Bostons and Milwaukee and that's tough to compete with. But I do like the pieces that they put in place there. They got some real young, talented basketball players up there, and I hope they can put it together. And I hope the town is patient with them because it's going to be incremental steps. You're going to have to really wait to see some of these other teams start to lose key pieces through free agency over the next 2 or 3 years before Detroit, I think, can make a move to be a consistent, playoff team that occasionally might make a deep run. But the foundation is there. The foundation is there.
Let's bring Big Al one more time. What you got for Ron before we let him go?
When we first talked to you, we had you on the show, you were gradually building up sports. I'm muted, aren't I?
Distance analysis.
I had myself muted. It was loud outside. Since we last had you on the show, I know when we first talked to you, you were building up Sportsopoly, and that was your labor of love. I just wanted to know, what's the status? How things are going with your site?
The site's going well. It is tough sledding to try to compete as a one-man shop against some of the more established news blogs out there. But I'm having the time of my life, man. Sitting around watching nothing but sports almost 24/7 and getting a chance to write about it. It's been fun. It's been fun mixing it up with the community of folks who are followers and who subscribe to the newsletter. That's really where I get most of my pleasure out of doing this, is being able to get in debates with people about their favorite teams and their favorite athletes and just having good, friendly conversations and debates about sports that we all are passionate about. We're passionate about our athletes and passionate about our teams. So that's been a lot of fun. I've got a lot of things on my brain about trying to, grow that brand and try to build it and generate some revenue that maybe can bring on some more collaborators and really kind of grow it But right now it's very much a one-man operation, and it's been a lot of fun. I think I've almost tripled the number of subscribers here over the past
awesome
3 or 4 months, which has been great. So I'm happy about that, and hopefully it will continue.
You know,
you guys are helping by allowing me to come on and
no
shoot the breeze with you on your podcast. So I appreciate the offer.
Al and I have been doing this since 2009, so 13 plus years, and we've always supported and been more than willing to support folks like you and other entrepreneur types, if you will. We've had a number. Al will tell you, we've had a ton of folks on this program as guests who have been kind of like you, these one-man band people, not necessarily with what you're doing, but just in general with some of the sports-related sites and
authors, podcasters, writers,
right, We've always been very sensitive to that and giving those kinds of folks whatever little space that we can give them in our little world here. But before I let you go, I'm curious because you and one of the things I remember talking to you about when we had you on at the top of the year was that what you just mentioned was about commiserating with the readers. You get into some debates and some lively discussions, which is always a lot of fun, of course. I was mentioning to Al on the last program that we did that when you go on the NFL Twitter, when I say NFL Twitter, I don't mean the league itself, but any given team's Twitter, for example, when the Lions are playing on Sunday, it's fun for me to go on the other team's Twitter and just kind of see what's going on. And one of the things that I noticed, and I want to get your take on this real quick, is that because you talk to so many different people from different teams, is that the funny thing is that my impression is that every NFL team's Twitter is the same in the sense that everybody's bitching about something. They want an assistant fired. They want the head coach fired. I've long said that in the NFL, there's 32 franchises. On any given Monday morning, 16 of those fan bases want the coach fired. On the following Monday morning, the other 16 teams want the same thing. That's the way it goes. So what is your impression about as you meet different people, Ron, and you talk to these folks, and it's not just the NFL, but anything that you're talking about? Do you get the impression there's a common thread among fan bases, no matter what the sport is, that they're all kind of the same?
Yes, I do think you hit on something there. I mean, I think a lot of fans use social media as therapy.
Yeah, right. That's a good way to put it.
It's a great way to offload your negative energy that you have for your team.
That's true.
And so when they're not playing well, I mean, my goodness, one of my favorite days of the year is Overreaction Monday after the first Sunday of NFL football.
Right.
And like you said, 16 fan bases are ready to fire the coach after one game. And this is the perfect outlet for them to do that. I think it's great. I mean, I think, I have a lot of other, issues with social media in general, but in terms of sports, it's an outlet for people to get that frustration off their chest because they put so much heart and soul into their teams, and then they watch their team on Sundays or Mondays or Thursday nights, and they don't get the output that they want.
Right.
It's a great place to go to collaborate with fellow sufferers that your team really crafted tonight or whatever the game is, and let's commiserate. And that will carry on for a day or two, and then they're back to rah-rah a few days later. So yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of the accounts are really kind of the same. The same vein runs through all 32 franchises, where fans get frustrated and they come together to express their frustration, and then they'll flip the coin over and they're back to cheering when the team suits up again. So it's a lot of fun. But it is therapy, and I use it for therapy too. I'm guilty of that as well.
That's a great way to put it, because you're right. Misery loves company, and I remember. I think it was Dan Henning, and don't quote me on this. I think it was Dan Henning. He was talking on NFL Films about how tough it is to be a coach in the NFL, head coach, and he was talking about he was one of the teams he was coaching had gone into Pittsburgh. And when Chuck Noll was still coaching, and he had apparently the Steelers were off to a rough start or something. There were banners at Three River Stadium that said "Fire Chuck Noll," and Dan Henning said, "Is this what I have to look forward to? If I win 4 Super Bowls, they want to fire me?" Yeah,
I mean, but, fans fans have short memories, man, and coaches know that it's a, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
Right. But
lately meaning last week, by the way. That's lately. Lately meaning last Sunday.
Exactly. But that's what makes being a fan fun, is that you get to get that frustration out. You know, you're spending money on these tickets, you're buying the merch, you're getting all the gear, and you're cheering your heart out. And they drop the game because they go for a 4th and 2. Game tied instead of kicking the field goal, and then Buffalo. I mean, I can't imagine how the Ravens fans felt, you know, after that game ended on Sunday. I'm sure they went to Twitter and just went ballistic. Yeah. And you know, Marcus Peters certainly did. And so it is part of the passion and the fun of being a fan, is that you get to sound off on these guys, these players, these coaches, and then you turn around and you love them the next Sunday because they go out and get you a win.
It's like the Browns. The Browns. I mean, how about when the Browns blew that lead against the Jets a couple weeks ago? I'm sure the Browns. I didn't check the Browns Twitter, but
that was. So
the Jets of those
epic, man.
All teams. Yeah. Okay, Ron. Well, thanks for being here, my friend. I love you like a brother, and whenever I go at you, come at you, it's not personal. You know that. I know
that. Absolutely. Love you guys.
And I apologize in advance for the next time Craig comes after you. So.
I told Greg in closing that, you know, once Campbell and Brad right the ship up there, that, you know, he's going to have to pay full freight to get back on the ship when it sails.
Exactly.
When they're winning 10, 11, 12 games a year, which is going to happen. I'm telling you. First of
all, it's not going to happen. Secondly, Al, I told Ron told me, and I'm gonna call him out on this. He said that he thinks the Lions will win 7 or 8 games this season. I challenged him to a bet which he has not yet accepted.
Smart man.
I think he's because I think buyers.
I just want to make sure they're not tanking. I just want to make sure they're not tanking. That's why I wanted to see 1 or 2 more games.
Ron, what I wanted when you said they'd win 7 or 8 games, what I wanted to say was over what period of time.
You know, after you mentioned that last night, Greg, I went and looked at their schedule. They got a tough little stretch coming up here.
Yes, they do.
Over the next 5 or 6 weeks.
Every stretch is tough for them.
I saw 1 or 2 solid wins in there, and maybe a third. Yes, but this will be a real test. They've had a tough stretch
They've had a tough stretch since 1964. Okay, Ron, thanks for being here, my friend. We appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll bring you back on in the show and chew on that bet. Okay, get back to me on that.
Yeah, I will. You guys are the best. Thanks, guys.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Ronnie. Bye-bye.
All right, be well.
You too.
Boy, Greg, you must give him hell on Twitter or something for for the give and take he's talking about here. I mean, you must come at him with both barrels or something.
I couldn't resist when I saw his piece come out, because I subscribed to Sportsopoly when it hit my inbox yesterday.
Yeah.
I said, "Oh my gosh," and as you know, I mean, God bless Ron for coming at this from a outsider's perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Without the jaded, crotchety viewpoint that I have. And he, hey, for what he did for his argument, for somebody who doesn't know, I get the feeling that Ron's talking to the national audience. He's not necessarily talking to the Detroit folks. So for a national audience, I told him this yesterday. I said, first of all, I appreciate you, truly appreciate you shining a light on the Lions. I really do. Because he was writing it from, I think his audience is the national audience, folks who may not know as much about the sordid history of the franchise, other than they lose a lot. So, hey, he I think for what he did and the audience he was writing it for, I can appreciate what he did. But, I have a personal disagreement with several of the things that he pointed out, but that's okay. That's what it's all about. That's why we have folks on this program to kind of talk about things like that. So good stuff with Ron. And I hope everybody enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that plays into this is that in the Lions kind of became America's team there for a while because of Hard Knocks and how likable the meathead, as you call him, Dan Campbell, came across during those 5 episodes. So, this is the most the Lions have been in the media, period, where people have actually been paying attention to them since I can remember. Now, between this this dichotomy between having a great offense and a worse defense, and and everything Dan Campbell's done and being on Hard Knocks, this is the most national attention the Lions have gotten in years. So it is interesting to see the thoughts of someone who's essentially unbiased, because his Ron's history is with Kansas City. He goes back with them for decades. So
yes,
so it's it was very it is refreshing to get a kind of an unbiased take. But yeah, you're right. The difference between outsiders who are kind of thinking, boy, those Lions are sure fun to watch on Red Zone. And then you got the Lions lifers like us saying, "Oh God, here we go again," with something only the Lions can do, which we'll get into about this dichotomy between the offense and defense. But it's I'll just say this: subscribe to Ron's newsletter, Sportsopoly. It's a lot of fun. He brings up a lot of good topics, and he covers. He's a journalist. He covers a lot of different things, and it's really worth your time. So there will be links in the show notes to his Twitter and to his website where you can subscribe. All right, Greg. Since we last spoke 2 weeks ago, the Lions are 0-2, and as we'll get into it, there's been plenty of controversy and second guessing going on. And we'll start with the loss to the Vikings, which I wasn't able to watch because I was up at the cabin. And literally, when all the hell was breaking loose at the end of the game, I was on the lake in a pontoon with a beer in my hand, kind of half following what was going on my phone, scrolling through, being into my ESPN updates. Mm-hmm. So I really didn't get firsthand what exactly went down until I actually had time later that night to see the controversy of Dan Campbell. And I'll ask you, Greg, when this all went down, because that entire game, Campbell had been aggressive as hell. I believe he went for it on fourth down 6 times. I think he ended up playing 4, and he made it 4 times, I believe. And they got to that point where I believe it was 4th and 4 in Vikings territory. And instead of being aggressive, he decided to go for a field goal. He had 3 choices. What it was, go for it. Now it was 4th and 4, and if he gets it, game's over. Punt the ball, and you have one of the best punters in the league in Jack Fox, who could very easily pin them inside the 5 or 10 yard line, or take your very unproven field goal kicker Austin Siebert and try for a career-long field goal, and he takes the worst choice of the 3, which is trying to kick field goal, especially since what's the difference between a 3-point lead and a 6-point lead for the most part? Either, if you kick the field goal and make it, you force they have to go a touchdown. Essentially, if he had even had gone for it, not gotten it, let me ask you, what were your thoughts, Greg, when this was all going down at the end of that game?
Well, I mean, when it happened, I mean, and this is, a lot of times you fans will play the armchair quarterback and they do the hindsight is 20/20. But at the time, when they lined up for the field goal, I said, this is not the right thing to do. They should be either pooch punting it to try to drive the Vikings deep, because the Vikings were bereft of timeouts,
right?
Or go for it,
which he had been doing all game.
Right, which he's been doing for not only all game, but ever since he became coach of the Lions.
Yeah.
And so here comes the field goal unit with the Siebert, who's not to be confused with Jason Hansen, by the way. Still, I'm thinking, I could buy it if the field goal would have turned it into a 2-score game.
Exactly.
If you're going to make this,
or even if you had Matt Prater on, as your kicker, maybe.
Even by turning it into a 2-score game, I don't know that I would have done it. I just think the risk you have to look at the risk reward aspect of it. And what am I getting? What am I potentially getting versus what I would be giving up? Well, what I'm giving up now is field position, because as you know, in the NFL, missed field goals are brought back not to the line of scrimmage like the old days, but to the spot of the kick.
Exactly.
Now you give them the ball, past their own 40-yard line. Now, granted, no timeouts. and granted needing a touchdown to go ahead.
Which they got in 3 plays.
Right. And so I thought my first thought was they should pooch it. Do a pooch punt. Worst case scenario in a pooch punt situation, it goes in the end zone, they get the ball at the 20. Now they got to go 80 yards. Worst case scenario was they get the ball in their own 44, whatever it was, which was the worst case, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
Well, the other, in the middle scenario was you go for it, maybe you don't make it, and they get the ball somewhere around the, around the 30-yard line area. And so, I don't pretend to be this guy who knows everything about pro football, but I thought that my decision was smarter than the one that the coach made, and lo and behold, we all know what happened. So at the time, I didn't buy it. I did not buy the field goal. I just didn't. And even if he had made it, you would have been, still a 1-score game, albeit with a 2-point conversion. And it just didn't make any sense to me. How about you?
Yeah, that's the thing. If it doesn't change the strategy for the Vikings all that much if you make the field goal. It's still a 1-score game instead of a field goal with a touchdown, but not that much difference. And you have a defense which has become painfully obvious has trouble stopping anybody.
Right.
So personally, I would have said go for it. Because you have a quarterback who's playing some of the best ball of his career right now. Yep. At least Jared Goff is playing much like young Jared Goff in the early days of his Rams when he was like an MVP candidate. And he's playing very, very, very well. And in that game, he still had all his weapons. So I could understand going for it. I mean, that's my thing, because I tend to err on being aggressive anyway. But you're right. I would not have argued that much with a punt either. And consider Jack Fox is a great kicker. And making him go 80, 90 yards, that's still a big ask, even if you have an iffy defense.
Right.
He had 3 choices, and he made the absolutely worst one. And that gave fodder for people like you who are not buying into the Dan Campbell experience. That he really lived up to the meathead moniker that you like to use for him. Because he comes off as this, I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to go for it on fourth. I'm going to play the odds. And for years, analysts and and advanced metrics have said NFL teams need to go for it on fourth down much more often. And he's been doing it, and but there's been some hiccups in the strategy. And then this is one where he should have been aggressive. He should have been extremely aggressive or extremely conservative and punted, and he tried to take the middle tack, and it fucked him over completely. So I guess in my case, I would have gone for it, and I think that was probably Campbell going. I bet you Campbell's gut feeling was, I need to go for it, but for some reason he chickened out, and he went for the easy. Let's just kick a field goal. Except you don't have Eddie Murray, Jason Hansen, or Matt Prater back there anymore. You have Austin freaking Siebert, who we found out has a bad groin anyway, and badly missed it. So I think it really comes down to Campbell should have known better, because it's obvious the defense is bad and it's not going to get fixed this year. You have an offense that has really become very, very impressive and moves the ball, if not at will, moves the ball pretty damn well, and you should not go against your aggressive nature, and that's exactly what he did. Essentially, he pissed off everybody, because I think anybody in their right mind would have either said go for it or punt. The worst decision he could have made is the one he did make, and that gives fodder to people saying, yeah, there's that meathead coming out again, and that has been a problem, Greg. He has shown a tendency to mismanage the ends of halves in games, and that was just the latest that's just the latest example of something that has been an ongoing concern with Dan Campbell.
I'll say a couple things that is kind of in his defense, and it's only because Are
you playing devil's advocate, Greg?
No, I'm not going to go that far, but I'm going to say a couple things that are kind of that are facts, frankly. One of them is that you mentioned mismanaging the ends of halves, and it's that when you really think about it, it's fascinating to me how many coaches in the NFL can't manage the ends of halves. Yeah. It's not just Detroit. I mean, fans, if they go outside their little bubble and watch other NFL games, you will see several examples on any given Sunday.
And Saturday,
coaches,
for that matter, as well.
Or Saturday, wherever,
yeah.
of coaches mismanaging the clock at the end of either the first half or the end of the game. It kind of is really kind of weird how often that really truly does happen. Now, the other thing I'll say is that at the very least, Campbell did not try to play I'm the smartest guy in the room in the post-game
that's a good point.
press conference and try to explain away his decision and try to, get us to buy what he was selling. He just flat out said, "Look,
I screwed up.
I screwed up. I told the team that I should have gone for it.
Yep.
I know I should have gone for it. For whatever reason, I didn't. I feel like I cost us the game. And that, if nothing else, that is kind of refreshing. You don't see too many NFL coaches who will do that.
Would Matt Patricia have done that? Oh, hell no.
No. They would try to give you some rambling, non-linear answer to.
Oh, he just wouldn't have answered the question. He would have answered something completely different. Exactly.
Or would have been very arrogant and or something. I don't know. But Campbell just, But then it made me think, well, gosh, if he's so, it wasn't even like he had a sleep on it, like he came out Monday in a Monday press conference
right.
and said, you know what, after sleeping on it, I realized I probably should have gone for it. No, he knew it like right away. So I'm thinking to myself, if he knew it that quickly, that he shouldn't have done that, then why did he do it?
Yeah.
I mean, if he knew, right off the get, almost like from the moment, it's almost like I get the feeling he realized his mistake the moment the kick when it was in the air.
Yeah, and say, well, you're right.
If I'm that close to realizing my mistake, that I'm reacting that quickly to a mistake I'm making, then why am I making the mistake?
Yeah.
And what made me make the decision that I made? And here's the thing. Here's the other thing I have a problem with is he comes into town. With this, and Ron Mott briefly mentioned it about his opening press conference with, we're gonna bite kneecaps and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. And all I've seen from him when push comes to shove is he goes into this little shell again. He goes into this little. There's no kneecap biting. The kneecap biting would have been what you suggested to go for it. And damn the
in the goddamn game right then and there.
Yeah,
exactly.
and you just brought, by the way, up something else, which is good football teams know how to finish football games. When we talked to Ron, I made mention of, if you look at the scoreboard, if you just grab a random scoreboard from a random week in the NFL for the past 20 years, just randomly, you will see a majority of the games are decided by anywhere from 1 to 8 points. So it's disingenuous to say, well, they're in these games, they've lost 8 games by 25 points. It doesn't matter. Every team in the NFL loses 8 games by 25 points. That's the way it is in the NFL. But the good teams, to your point about finishing games, the good teams know how to finish games. The good team, like the Seahawks, not that the Seahawks are a good team, of course,
but they have a Super Bowl winning coach who has been there.
They had the wherewithal when they needed to get that first down at the end of the game. They got it. And the Lions don't do that. Even if they do win a game like that, they'll always give the team the football one last time, and all the fans have to sweat it out because they never ever go into victory formation. Hardly ever go in. Their wins are because they survived the game and the time runs out. They hardly ever go into victory formation. So that's just an example of why this franchise just continues. You know, you know where I stand with Campbell. I'm not playing it, I'm not like God bless Ron Mott. I'm not buying Campbell. I'm just not. And he continues to make decisions like he did. Now, the next thing we'll talk about in a second, I want to get your take a little bit about the whole defensive coordinator thing. But as far as the Minnesota game goes, it was just, a clear case of the coach not putting his team, because he, like you said, he gave a bad defense a short field to defend, and that's unforgivable. Yeah.
And I guess we'll move on. That was a big controversy from the first game, our off week game, so to speak, and then this past Sunday, we had a ridiculous 48-45 loss to the honestly tanking Seahawks. I mean, they traded away their Hall of Fame possible Hall of Fame level quarterback and replaced him with a journeyman who. God, why did I God damn it, Geno Smith. I had to think about it. That's how much of a journeyman he is. I had to think about it.
Right.
And then he had a Matt Flynn-like game. If you're an old school Lions fan, you know exactly what I'm referring to.
Oh, yeah, of course I have. Yeah.
What said the volumes about this game, not so much that the Lions offense put up 45 points. Jared Goff played pretty darn well, except for a couple hiccups, especially a painful pick six. That was very Stafford-like with that play. But the Lions gave up 48 points, and they never, ever forced a punt in a game that had I think it ended up being almost 1,100 yards of offense. The Lions' defense could never get a stop. The only time they got a stop was the end of the game when the Seahawks took a knee. Victory formation, there you go. And that game was just so frustrating to watch because it really looked like the Lions were, for the most part, going to be able to score at will on Seattle. They were able to do whatever they wanted offensively, either on the ground or through the air, but the defense could never get them the ball.
Right.
And here we are, 48-45, a ridiculous, very Lions-esque loss to lose 48-45. One of the highest it's the highest scoring game the Lions, I think, have ever. That's the most points they ever scored in a loss, I believe. I've read it's one of the top 20 highest scoring games in the history of the NFL. And trivia note, Jared Goff's been in 3 of those 20 games at this point of his career. And I guess then the issue with this game was it was really all about the defense in this one. And supposed rising star Aaron Glenn, the Lions defensive coordinator, who in the post game, Campbell did not throw under the bus to his credit, but people are asking, well, you had similar issues with Anthony Lynn as your offensive coordinator last year, and you took away his duties, and for the most part, Campbell took over play calling. Then they added Ben Johnson, who is now the OC, who eventually grew into the job. What's going to happen with Aaron Glenn? Because he has a historically bad defense right now. And what is even more frustrating about this is that the Lions offense was missing their top 2 wide receivers, was missing their number 1 running back, and was missing their 2 starting guards. And yet they had 520 yards of offense and scored 45 points. Glenn has the number 2 pick in the draft, has a 6th-round linebacker who is exceeding expectations. It looks like he's going to be a fixture as, at the very worst, a 2-down run-stopping linebacker in Rodriguez. And I just mentioned Aiden Hutchinson, and then you also have a cornerback in. God damn it, Greg, I'm getting old. Achilles, who had he recovered from the Achilles heel.
Oh,
Kuda, yeah, Jeff Okudah, who was actually playing halfway decent football. He at least looks like a competent cornerback, which he never did there in the Patricia era. There are some building blocks there, and obviously they're not yet talented, but they are. There's no NFL defense that should never get a stop, and that is bringing up what is Aaron Glenn doing and what are you doing to fix it. And we saw what Campbell did last year to fix it. He took over, and ultimately found someone on his staff to take over. Does he do the same thing with Aaron Glenn? It's an argument that can be made right now. I believe the quote that what Campbell used is, "We're going to look at everything. We're going to look at it all, top to bottom." But he also said Glenn's job is not in jeopardy. So, how long can you continue to do that if you're giving up if you're giving up an average of 35 points a game? That's completely unacceptable. And if this continues, someone's head's got to roll. It's ultimately going to have to be Glenn.
Yeah, Glenn is putting Campbell in kind of a box right now.
Yes, he is. Good point.
You mentioned the Anthony Lynn scenario, and of course he didn't fire Lynn until after the season.
He just essentially put him in a corner and ignored him for half the season.
It wasn't a good, for whatever reason. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it just doesn't.
And to his credit, they were both adults about it. It was handled, and then Lynn moved on at the end of the year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you bring a guy in, and it
doesn't work.
For whatever reason, right. And so nobody, of course, goes into those things thinking they're going to end that way, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. Now, the thing with with the Lions defense, and we'll talk about Glenn in a second, is I don't know if you've noticed that a lot of these running plays that the Lions have been gashed on have been seemingly like either basic off-tackle plays or pitches to the running back, sweeping. And I've noticed that a lot of times, Al, these running backs from the other teams, they're 6 or 7 yards past the line of scrimmage, not 6 or 7 yards from the time they take the ball, 6 or 7 yards past the line of scrimmage before they even encounter a defender.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the play develop a mile away, and this is going to hit for 12 yards because you can just see there's no one in the vicinity.
Yeah, and that's what Rashard Penny said on that last running play that sealed the game. He goes, we knew exactly what they were going to run, and we ran the exact perfect play that we needed to run to beat that defense. And they could what was it, like 4? It was 3rd and 6, and they got like 12 yards. Game over. How many times?
This is just so. Yeah. How many times, Al, have we heard an opposing player say the same kind of thing that Penny said on both sides of the football? Yeah. Whether it's we knew what they were going to run. Whether it's a defender that says, we knew what the Lions were going to run offensively. Yep. Stop. Or in this case, Penny. Well, we knew what they were going to run defensively, so we did this and we got the first down. That kind of garbage has been going on around here for years, not just with Campbell. Yeah. But with other coaches as well, with the other, it's almost, and I know these other players, by the way, I know they don't mean it to be, to kick a team when they're down. Because they're merely answering questions that are being asked of them. So I'm not suggesting that they're going out of their way to mock the Lions or make fun of them. But so many times I've heard other teams' players, not so much the coaches, because the coaches are a lot more diplomatic than players are. But I've heard so many players say the same thing that Penny said. We knew this and we knew that and we did this and we did that and bingo bango, the game's over. And that's been going on for a long, long time. And I don't understand it. I really don't understand that. But back to Glenn. Well,
before we get to Glenn, let me run off some of these stats. Sure. So let's just show how bad he is.
Yeah.
Currently, the Lions defense is on pace to allow 599 points this season, which would shatter the NFL record currently at 533 from the 81 Colts. They rank last in total defense at 448 yards per game they're giving up. Third down defense, they are a conversion rate of almost 53%. Red zone defense, they are allowing 86.7% of opponent trips result in a touchdown when they get in the red zone. And rushing yards per play is 5.6 yards per carry. That's someone who's going to. That means you're giving up 120 some yards a game on the ground just to start. It puts you right in the hole. Right. So that's just scratching the surface of how bad the defense has been. I guess the other thing to mention is the Lions have scored 140 points, and I know I put that stat here. They are the Lions are the 30th team in the Super Bowl era to score 140 more points in their first 4 games, and yet they are the only one of those 30 to have a losing record. And that's because they have given up 141 points.
Right.
So that leads us to the as you mentioned, the Aaron Glenn conundrum, because he was thought during Hard Knocks. People, because he talked such a great game, he was came across as this great motivator, and there was a lot of talk of him being he was going to be a rising star who was tracking to be an NFL head coach very, very soon, if not next year, in the next couple years. And in these 4 games have completely taken the shine off his star, so to speak. Now we're to the point where if he's even going to be able to finish the season as the Lions defensive coordinator. I mean, yes, they are lacking in talent, but you can out-scheme some of that lacking of talent, and that's the issue. They're being out-coached, they're being out-schemed, they're being outplayed, and it's so frustrating to see, because this is so far the offense is looking like it's going to be a top 5 NFL offense.
Well, scheming, yes, and not adjustments made at halftime and things. The other thing that the Lions don't do is make any sort of adjustments at halftime or throughout the game as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's just like we're going to blitz. We're just going to blitz.
Yeah. I guess what it comes down to, you mentioned the talent. You're right. I mean, there's no question that this is not a talented defense by any stretch, and they're not getting turnovers, which sometimes you can mask. Sometimes you can mask a bad defense by getting the occasional fumble or interception. They're not getting that either. So they're not turning the ball over, and it's just embarrassing. The Seahawks, Al, that was their first time in their 47-year history where they've played a game and never punted. Yeah. By the way,
yeah, I think they came into the game averaging 17 points a game.
Right, they scored more points in that game Sunday than they had scored in the first 3 games combined.
Exactly.
All the way you mentioned, you just illustrated some numbers earlier. Any way you slice it, any metric you use, and you mentioned a bunch of them, by the way. Any metric that you use, and even these historical stats, which are embarrassing that I just mentioned, all add up to an embarrassing scenario. Now, what is it? Is Glenn incapable of getting of making adjustments? Is he stubborn? Is he trying to put a square peg in a round hole in terms of he doesn't have the personnel that he needs to run what he wants to run? Is he being out-coached?
Is he a position coach who's in over his head? Right. It could be numerous things.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, you mentioned that's a good point, by the way. There are a lot of coordinators, as you know, who've gone on to take a head coaching job, and it hasn't worked, and they go back to being a coordinator, and that's fine. The Jim Schwartzes of the world, that kind of thing. The morning wake, go back to being a coordinator, and that's where they're kind of like their comfort zone, and that's okay. You're right. There's also the case of position coaches, but of course, sooner or later you never know until you give a guy a promotion, of course. But these position coaches, like you indicated, in over his head. Now, the thing I've been fascinated to see is. And this is what happens when you talk up your coaches as much as Dan Campbell has talked his up since he took the job. He loves everybody. He loves all his coaches. They're all the greatest things in sliced bread. But sooner or later, you have to make a decision. That's why I said earlier in the discussion that Glenn is putting him in a box, because sooner or later, if this continues, now I don't necessarily, I hope it wouldn't continue at this rate of incompetency, but if it does not get better, then sooner or later Campbell is going to have to just say, I love Aaron Glenn like a brother, but I have to make a change. Now, that which is not, of course, any guarantee that things are going to get better right away, and maybe Glenn does indeed survive the season, and maybe they just ride it out. But it's just, and I even me, who, as you know, I told everybody who would listen, this defense is awful. It's rotten. And don't expect more than 3 or 4 wins. Even I didn't think it was going to be as bad numerically as it is so far. I knew it wasn't good. I didn't know it was going to be this bad. Yeah,
you thought it was just going to be run-of-the-mill bad, not historically bad. Yeah. Much like like we've talked about with the Tigers. But it's in the juxtaposition between this and the offense. Let me for some of the offensive numbers. Obviously, going into the season, it was expected the offense was going to be better. Because they've put a lot of over the past few years, they put a lot of capital into the offensive line and running back, wide receiver. Obviously, Jared Goff is a reclamation project. Yeah. And through 4 games, the offense is first overall in total yards. They are first overall in points scored. They're 5th in passing yards, 6th in rushing yards. They're averaging 5.9 yards per carry on the ground and 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Both very, very good numbers. Jared Goff leads the NFL with 11 touchdown passes, and Jamal Williams, who's the number 2 running back, leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns with 6. So, here we are with a team putting gaudy numbers on the board, and they've done some of this without their best players. Swift missed the Seattle game, and he was essentially gimpy for the Vikings game. And they didn't have St. Brown or Chark in the last game against Seattle. And obviously the offensive line is still not fully healthy yet. They have not the line they thought they're going to have to start the year is still not played together, and they're still grinding out yards. So, and what's kind of funny, Greg, is that if you watched Hard Knocks, Aaron Glenn was he dominated long stretches of the show, from his talk and his trash talking and his motivation, blah, blah, blah. Yet their offensive coordinator, was it Ben Johnson? I think he turned up only once or twice, and that was just in the background while he was sitting in meetings. And he never said a word, I think, on camera. Yet his offense is lighting up the NFL right now. I don't know if that means anything, but it does say something about, you got to back up your talk. They have an offensive coordinator and he essentially was being groomed for the position at the end of last year when the Lions offense started to really pick up. I mean, Goff looked like a presentable quarterback the last quarter of last season, and that has continued this year. And then you got Glenn, who has talked a huge game and yet has not been able to back it up. But you got Johnson just grinding away in the background, and he's put together this very, it's a well-balanced offense and they really don't have a true impact star on that offense when you think about it. They don't really have any all-pro level running backs or wide receivers. They do have some Pro Bowl linemen, but they don't have any superstars on that offense, and yet they are putting together some really good numbers.
They are. There's no question about that. Numbers don't lie. Goff is not, for all the slings and arrows that he's taken from us.
Deservedly
he's really
so.
But he's not the problem right now. Clearly, I mean,
no. And we'll talk about what problem that could cause a little bit later.
Yeah.
So
you're looking at it. You look at his numbers. I mean, they're good. There's no question about it. He's had a good first 4 games. He's not. His decision making seems a lot better. He's still not accurate downfield, but he's not at the same time. He's not throwing 11 interceptions. He did have a pick 6 Sunday against Seattle, but he's not. He's
not the problem.
No,
in other words.
That's for sure. That's for sure. It does not mask the fact that the Lions still need to groom another quarterback. We talked about that last time, but you're right. He's put up good numbers. They did score 45 points against without some of their key guys. Hawkinson had a big game, of course.
Yeah. Where has he been for the last 4 seasons?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, and Ron Mott says, hey, they're exciting, and they are scoring a lot of points. There's no question about that. I don't know if it's sustainable or not, but let's face it. But it's always something with this team, and this year it's the defense. Last year it was the offense. Mm-hmm. And so there's always something wrong with they're always zigging when they should be zagging. That's been going on forever. But yeah, I mean, if you like your losing in high scoring doses, then the Lions are the team for you, I guess.
Yeah, this is kind of like watching the early '80s Pistons. They couldn't stop anybody either, yet they were scoring a ridiculous amount. So think about it. It really is. So,
true.
But. Okay, a little bit about Jared Goff before we start kind of slowly winding our way to the end of the show. Jared Goff, as he worked, when the Lions obtained him in that Stafford trade, Greg, mm-hmm. It was widely believed that he was just going to be a stopgap. They'll keep him for a year or two. Right. After this season, there's that $10 million out mm-hmm. where they could just walk away and clear mm-hmm. off a bunch of cap room and mm-hmm. then maybe look for their quarterback in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of a sudden, you have Goff, who's playing like a top 10, top 15 quarterback. His numbers are very comparable to Matthew Stafford as a Lion. And the thing is, he's still under. If you don't walk away from him after this year, he's still under contract for 2 more years at an entirely reasonable, at least in today's NFL, for a starting quarterback, $30 million a year. So. And we see the issues this team has, especially defensively. I mean, common wisdom a year ago, or 2 years ago, thought one of those Rams or Lions draft picks over the next 2 years is going to go for a quarterback. Do you think that plan has changed with the way Goff has played, especially not just this year? I mean, going back to the last quarter of last year, he put up some very good numbers as well. He's starting to play like the Goff we saw in that very famous game against the Chiefs, where I think they ended up losing. I don't know if they won or lost that game, but it was like 56-50 or something like that. And both Goff and and Patrick Mahomes threw for like 500 yards. So, this is kind of a weird situation because you got to wonder, is Goff the guy to get you over the hump? Because it's obvious that the Rams didn't think so. And so what do you do with a quarterback who is probably good enough, but you not completely sure if he's good enough. He's good enough to maybe get you to playoffs in the next couple of years. But is he good enough to get you past that? The Rams didn't think so. And if he's not going to be that guy, then why do you keep him around? And that's the decision the Lions have to make.
Right. Well, he's good. The answer is he's good enough for the Lions. Okay. What I mean by that is where they are right now in their. I hate to even use the word rebuild because this has been going on forever. But
their situation.
In this current administration.
Administrator. There you go.
Okay. He is good enough for what this team is right now, which means that. He's not going to lead anybody to the promised land if his defense is giving up 35 points a game. Nobody's going to go to any promised land.
Yeah, I don't care Patrick Mahomes is going to take it to promised land when your defense gives up that kind of shit.
So, and because they've been derelict in finding a capable quarterback to
they haven't drafted a good. Right. I haven't drafted anybody in the first 2 days since Matthew Stafford.
Right.
That's that's 13 years.
Because they haven't done that, they almost. You know what's really going to kind of happen here is they're going to kind of be lucky in the sense that everybody's going to say, and rightfully so, when the season is over with, that the Lions have to go heavy on defense in the draft. And
they're already saying that, honestly.
Yeah. And the quarterback situation, I think, is going to just kind of work itself out, and I think the Lions will stick with him, Goff. And I think they'll ride it out with him because he's certainly the best option they have. Probably will be the best option. He's not old. I mean, he's like, 26, 27?
He's 28 years old.
28. Okay, so he's still got.
He's 7 years younger than Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, right. So that's 28 in the NFL as a quarterback is super young.
That's young as a starting quarterback. He's got.
So there's really, when you think about it, you really don't have to make a move at quarterback. You don't have to buy him out. You don't have to go searching for another guy. I don't think. I think
you don't have to extend him either. That's the other.
No, right. Everything kind of just you do right. So I think what you do is you just go heavy on defense and the Goff
and let's
thing,
let it go for another year.
Yeah, right. I mean, kick the can down the road with Goff. I mean, obviously this is all dependent upon draft position, who's available. Yeah. I can't remember. Is the 2023 class of quarterbacks supposed to be any good draft wise?
Supposedly it's supposed to be halfway decent because you got the Alabama quarterback, got Ohio State quarterback. I believe there's a few other guys that are possibly first round worthy. It's supposed to be better than this last draft. I'll say that much.
Okay.
Much better than this last draft where no one even wanted to touch a quarterback in the first round.
Right.
Other than pick it.
If you look at it, right. If you look at Brad Holmes, the offseason moves, he paid incredibly little attention to the defense. It was really kind of perplexing that he didn't really do anything on that side of the football in terms of even in the draft, free agency.
Free agency especially, I think, is more essentially what they did. He brought the same guys back.
Yeah.
On a defense that was 31st in the league last year.
That was putting a lot of stock into a young roster. Now, having said all that, of course, as you know, free agency in the NFL is not a given either. I mean, we've seen that how many times.
Right.
You bring in a Trey Flowers, you bring in any number of guys they brought in over the years. Who's that big guy they brought in from Baltimore years ago? The big dude from
Harrison?
Baltimore. No. Well, him too.
It's serious. What's it? I know who you're talking about,
like
but
Hawaiian
both
type
old
name.
And senile at this point. So.
Yeah. Well, anyways, they bring these guys in defensively, and they don't do anything either. So it's disingenuous to say, well, they should have gone for free agency because that never works either. But he paid so little attention to the defense and brought basically, like you said, the same cast of characters for the most part, the same cast of characters back, and that's fine if you've got a guy, i.e. Glenn, who's this maybe a guru. You have a defensive guru, a guy that can, coach guys up and, okay, we're going to progress this thing. We're going to bring the same group back and we're going to be better. And that's not happening. And so but this back to I know your original question was about Goff. I think what they should just end up doing is just sticking with him. I don't, at this juncture, Al, I don't know that you do anything other than that. I think when you focus on defense, see if you can get that right. See if you can keep your offensive line healthy. See if you can keep your running backs healthy because Swift is always hurt. And try to. I mean, if you can keep these guys healthy, together as a unit, as an 11-man unit, and just focus on the defensive side of it. Because the offensive side of the football, they're relatively young. I mean, they've got a little bit of veteran leadership on the line, but for the most part, when the skill positions. They're relatively young, so you don't have to make any major tweaks there, but you have to fix the defense because it's just outgunned incredibly every week.
Yeah, it's it's just such a lion situation.
I think you're muted out.
Oh.
To me,
yep, I was muted again. Yeah, of course I was. It's such a lion situation to find themselves in. That's all.
Basically,
that the plan you expected is suddenly changing, and it's I don't know. It's I'm happy that Goff's playing well. I'm still not totally convinced he's the guy that you want for the next 10 years or 7 years, 8 years, or whatever. Anyway, but at the very least, you have a legitimate NFL starting quarterback. And there's, I would say, probably 10, 15 teams in the league that can't say that. So, at least for now, they're fine. I think that might be the best move to make is not to make any move at quarterback, at least for the time. Maybe, at the very least, maybe start. They need to do something because the quarterback room, once you get past Goff, is literally, there's nothing. Nate Sudfeld, really? They brought back Tim freaking Boyle. That's, at the very least, do something there, and then we can deal with Goff after next year when we have a better idea as to, is this sustainable from him? Is he going to be this guy who's going to put up a 100 QB rating and throw for 4,000 yards? If he's that guy, I'm more than happy. We'll just go with him, and and we'll worry about that extension 2 years from now. But yeah, it's this is such a Lions thing to be in, where you have they can never put everything all together at once. No, it's one side of the ball or the other. Either you have a great quarterback and then you have nothing else, or you have a lot of other things and you don't have a quarterback, which was our youth for the most part. So the Lions have never ever been able to put all the right pieces together at the same damn time. And here we are again. Once again, a team that has pieces, but not all of them and not all together, and it's beyond frustrating.
Right.
All right, before we wrap things up, Greg, let's talk a little Tigers. They are finishing the season white hot. They are 11-2 in their last 13. They're 9-1 in their last 10. And amazingly enough, they are now not going to lose 100 games. They have 3 games left to play. Actually, they are playing right now, and they are tied in the 8th inning in Seattle. That at the very worst, they're going to lose 96. They'll probably end up losing 94, 95, something like that. But baseball's a funny game to see. It's weird. At the very least, this isn't going to affect their draft status that much because now there's another draft lottery. The MLB has adopted that as well. So regardless of all that, I think the big news of the past couple weeks, other than the Tigers playing respectable baseball, but it doesn't matter, is Miguel Cabrera is officially going to return in 2023. Tigers president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, who we talked about quite a bit on our last show, and manager A.J. Hinch also was involved in this. They say Cabrera will play in Detroit next season, which, barring a miracle fix to his chronically bad injured knees, is going to be his last season. We're not expecting any kind of Albert Pujols resurgence, to say the very least. But because post All-Star game this year, Cabrera is hitting 167. He is a 250 on base percentage. And this is a guy who used to be able to take walks at will. And he's slugging 241. This guy hits like Ray Oyler now. He's got a 491 OPS in the second half. For the season, he is negative 1.1 WAR. And this is one of those things that the Tigers' hands are kind of tied. But you know what really kind of bugged me, Greg? This is a guy who can't stay healthy. It's proven he's been able to stay healthy for the last 5 years. Yet it was announced today Cabrera will play for Venezuela in the 2023 World Baseball Classic.
Right.
So I hope he's just there as more a ceremonial thing, or maybe use him as the occasional pinch hitter. Because if Cabrera is insisting on playing one last year in Detroit, I don't know. Maybe it would be better if he got hurt in the WBC. I hate having that attitude of him. But maybe they would be better off if he got himself injured in the WBC, and then they wouldn't have to play him in the regular season that much. But I just found it interesting that he can't stay healthy, so he's going to play more baseball next year. So regardless of all that, I think we both saw this coming. But, I think there's a significant portion of the fan base who are to the point with him where they're saying, just pay him the $40 million, put up a statue, and then let's move on from the Cabrera era.
Lynn Henning came out with a piece. I'm not sure if you saw it. He came.
No, it was behind a paywall, I believe. So I wasn't able to read.
He came out with it today or yesterday, I think, and it was basically saying, I think it was yesterday, basically saying that the Tigers' decision to bring Cabrera back was based largely on their heart rather than their mind, and he made a case that, from a strictly baseball standpoint, that it makes no sense, little to no sense, to bring him back at that cost, excuse me, and at the level at which he's now performing. And he said, look, there's some people out there who will say, well, the Tigers probably aren't going to be very good in 2023 either, so what does it matter? And Henning said, well, to those folks I say, fine, but I don't want to. Basically what he said was, I don't want to hear you bitching next year about Cabrera dragging the team down, no matter how good or how bad they are. So he came out on the side of the Tigers should not. What he was suggesting they should do is have a Miguel Cabrera weekend early next year, where the whole city celebrates him, and he doesn't play next year. They write him that check that you're talking about, and buy him out, and then he doesn't play, and then they have this little weekend for him. Now it would rob him of any sort of league-wide farewell tour, which some people pull out of stock in that, some people don't. I mean, they had one for Jim Thome, for God's sakes. I mean, some of these guys retire, and everybody, even Paul Konerko got a little bit of a farewell. But from a baseball standpoint, it doesn't make much sense. And I wrote about that way back in, I want to say, April or May of this year, when I said, look, A.J. Hinch is going to, and this was Hinch at the time, not management so much, but Hinch is going to have a decision to make about how he chooses to use Cabrera, not only this year, but next year, when he's going to be one more year older and he's going to be that much less effective. And what do you do with this guy? I mean, what's worse? Is it worse to have a guy, Al, who you're paying not to play, which would be the case if they bought him out? Or is it worse to pay a guy $30-some-odd million a year to get 150 at-bats, which is what really he should be getting? But when you have a guy of that magnitude sitting on the bench 3 out of 4 for essentially 75% of the season, that's not good either. And you mentioned that we saw this coming. We did. But neither of us, at the same time, neither of us knew really how this was going to play out and how to handle this. At this juncture, I'm kind of in that realm where if they bring him back, okay. If they don't bring him back, okay. But I think I would prefer that they not, only because it's sad to see someone who used to be really, really, really good be really, really, really bad. And I know that it happens to everyone. I mean, it's no shame that what's happening to him. It's not, and what gets me irritated, though, I will say this, what gets me irritated are the fans who, for whatever reason, have this venom toward him. And I don't understand that. They're really venomous toward this guy. And I stealing, he's stealing money, and he's this and he's that. And I don't, it's not surprising, of course, but it's disturbing that the fans have taken that kind of a. No, don't get me wrong. There's still a lot of Miguel Cabrera fans, a lot of Miguel Cabrera lovers out there, and that's fine. But some of the vitriol this guy gets because his body breaks down and he doesn't. They say he's fat, he's overweight. I don't know if he's fat and overweight. I just think he's a big guy. I mean, sometimes Willie Horton was a big guy. Nobody ever called Willie Horton fat. He was the same kind of body structure. I mean, he was a big, strong guy. Willie was, and even when he, but he was able to kind of go out a little bit. He had a really good year with Seattle in '79 when he was like 37 years old or something. As a DH. And playing on AstroTurf and everything, Cabrera, his body broke down, and
I think people would be a little more forgiving if it hadn't been for the past like 5 to 6 years of this. 1 or 2 towards the end of his career, I think people would have been a little more understanding. But almost the minute that that contract extension kicked in, he started a major decline, and he's never been able to pull out of it. And that's the thing. If this had only been going on for a couple years, I think people would be a little more forgiving.
Right.
But still, you can't blame Cabrera for signing the contract. If you're going to get upset at the guy in the ground, Mike Ilitch. He's the one who insisted that they keep Miguel Cabrera. Yeah. I mean, literally, they insisted that they extend him for a ridiculously long contract when he was 35 years old or whatever. Yeah, because he's when that contract kicked in. So. Don't get mad at the player. Get mad at the organization for doing it. And for that matter, if they hadn't assigned him and let him go, they would have been just as upset. They really would have been. There's no winning in a situation like this when you have a great player at the end of his career. You just have to hope that he holds up for the majority of that contract.
Well, you know what though? But if they had let him go, here's the thing. Now you go back.
There were still 2 years in that deal when they extended him.
When you wind the clocks back at the time that extension was doled out, I think the problem I have with the extension, any extension of a player who's past 30, is you're bidding against yourself at that point, because I don't know really at the time, Al, that there would have been. You mentioned the 2 years left before the extension kicked in. I don't know at the time that there would have been. What the market would have been for him,
right?
If the Tigers let the contract run out, didn't sign an extension whatsoever, or tried to offer him something that maybe he may not have accepted, and for him to test free agency waters, what the difference would have been, to your point about fans would have been more forgiving. The difference would have been that he would have left, and the fans would have gotten it out of their system. Now, they still haven't gotten it out of their system about Verlander, and they still haven't gotten it out of their system about JD Martinez for whatever reason, because because those guys were traded. Those guys were traded away, and the return wasn't all that great. Right. When you let a guy walk away, like if they would have let Cabrera walk away, and he signs a deal with somebody else, goes to another team, you get it out of your system. It's okay, well, he's gone. It would have been a lot of money to keep him here. Maybe it's just as well that he's not here, and now you focus on who is here. But the fact that they traded Verlander and didn't get much, they traded JD Martinez and didn't get much. That's why the fans can't get those players. They still can't get over it. It's been 5 years since they traded Verlander, and the fans still aren't over it. I mean, they still think he's going to come back and play for Detroit. It's really kind of weird, the whole Verlander thing. But the Miguel Cabrera thing, I think if they would have let him go and not did what Mike Ilitch did, I think the fans would have gotten over it. And it's okay. Well, but like you said, it's been a slow death. It's been a slow, excruciating, painful death to this career. And I think I still think they're too rough on the guy, frankly. But I think that contributes to what you're saying, is that the fans would have been more forgiving if he was more productive earlier on in that contract. Yeah. Than, like you said, almost immediately declining the moment the ink dried, almost immediately declining, like Justin Aldicator did when he signed a big contract for the Red Sox. As soon as that ink dried, he went down the tubes. The same thing with Cabrera. But if they had let him go, it would have been a little rough. Okay, yeah, we lost him. He signed, press conference with the Cardinals or somebody. He's holding up a new jersey. That would have been a little rough to see, but the fans would have gotten that out of their system, and they would have been able to move on. And here, it's been like picking at a scab for the last 5 years, and that's why this has become so ugly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I just looked up his numbers, and his last legitimately productive year was 2016.
And you're muted again.
Oh, there I am. Yes, I'm muted again. Good Lord. I don't want people hear me typing. I'll bring up the stats. And his last full productive year was 2016. That was his last actually positive WAR year. He was 5.7 WAR. He had he had an OPS of 956, and then it's been ever since then. I mean, that was the first year of his contract, of the new contract, and it's tailed off ever since. Where he's put up some, you look at his OPS has been in the 700s, but he's playing anywhere from like 30 to 100 games a year because he can't stay healthy either. And the longer he is able to play, the more the numbers drop. It's it's sad to see. I guess that's all I can say about it. I hate watching it happen. I'm not going to hold it against him for signing the contract. I can't hold it against the Tigers for not handling this a little bit better. And that they need to. The perfect scenario, in my opinion, excuse me, would be just to come back, have him play the first week of the first home stand of the season, the first week of the season, whatever that may be, and then he retires. You get all that, the thank yous and the huzzahs and all that. Then he retires, and then you open up that roster spot and actually then start building for the future.
Right.
Because I see people online, well, you should give him one more year so people can say their goodbyes. They've had 5 years to do that, especially this year. Especially once he hit the milestones, the 3,000 hits and the 500 home runs.
Yeah.
And after that, what else is there? Yeah. I mean, I loved watching Miguel Cabrera for about a decade period. He was the best right-handed hitter in baseball. If it wasn't Pujols, it was him.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're not going to see any kind of resurgence. And for all the talk of Albert Pujols, he only plays against left-handed hitters, and he doesn't play much. But the Cardinals are picking and choosing the places and when and where to play him. And it's really paid off in that he's had this power surge where he's able to reach the 700 home run mark. That can't happen with Cabrera because Cabrera just cannot, those knees, pure and simple. He essentially swings at the upper half of his body. He can't run anymore, literally can't run, and there's no power at all. So, I know it's a tough decision to make, but if I were Chris Ilitch, I mean, realistically, how many tickets is Cabrera going to sell? They would sell for one weekend when they have goodbye Campbell Cabrera weekend. That would be it. You want to do it at the beginning of the year rather than at the end of the year. And then pay him his $40 million, the $32 million he's owed, and plus the $8 million buyout, and then call it a year. But that could still happen. Because right now Harris pretty much has to say this anyway. He's the new guy here. He's got to let it play out a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So if things could still change, but. And the Tigers could just write that check and say, we love you, Miguel. We'll give you a Gordie Howe-like job, or let's set you up in Venezuela with your as a scout or whatever the hell you want to do. You just can't do it on the field. But we'll see what happens in April, in March maybe. Who knows what'll happen? But it's going to come to a head. Yeah. All right, let's get out of here because I know we're starting to run long. So, Greg, who's your jerk of the week?
Well, here we go. We're starting the postseason in baseball, which is coming up real quick here.
Starts Friday. Yep.
Starts Friday. And here's who we're not going to see in the postseason yet again. We're not going to see Mike Trout. We're not going to see Shohei Ohtani.
Nope.
Two of the, Trout, even though he's maybe not quite the player he was a few years ago, is still one of the best players in the game. Ohtani, who is Ohtani, let's face it.
Yep.
And here we are once again robbed of seeing these guys play in the postseason. Now, Trout has been in the big leagues for about 11, 12 years now, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And he's played one postseason series, which was a 3-game
That's amazing.
Which was a 3-game sweep at the hands of the Royals in 2014. So that was 8 years ago. Of course, Ohtani never played the playoffs since he's been in the big leagues. And the Angels, and this is my jerk of the week, are the Angels, by the way. The
Yeah.
Los Angeles Angels are my jerk of the week because they cannot get it right. They can't put together a pitching staff. They can't put together a team around Trout and Ohtani.
Mm-hmm.
They can't, they even brought back Joe Madden. That didn't work. They can't do anything to get this thing right. And now Ohtani, who just signed I think a qualifying offer last week or something to come back to play 2023 with the Angels. And I'm thinking to myself, please, God, Ohtani, don't extend this any longer. I was mad at Trout 2 or 3 years ago. I wrote a piece on it 2 or 3 years ago when Trout hitched onto the Angels train for a million years. I don't know why he did that. I don't know what kind of, Trout's from New Jersey. He should have gone to Philadelphia and gone back to where he's from and been a Philly. But he decided for whatever reason, I don't know what he was thinking, to hitch his ride to the Angels, the organization that's one of the worst organizations since they've been around. And now Ohtani, signs the qualifying offer, fine. Now he can be a free agent after next year, and I'm just praying that he does not re-sign with the Angels. This is a guy, Ohtani, the ship has almost sailed on Trout. I mean, I hate to say it, but even though Trout's one of the best players in the game still, I mean, I'm almost giving up on him being in the playoffs again. But Ohtani ought to go. I don't want him to. I'm not saying the Yankees. I'm not saying that necessarily. But Ohtani's got to go somewhere where he can be in the playoffs. I mean, Major League Baseball needs. Can you imagine a guy like Ohtani in the playoffs?
Yeah.
I mean, it's and the Angels are already a team that nobody watches because they play on the West Coast. You never see them on television because the games start at 10 o'clock at night out here, and they end at 1:30 in the morning. So you never see them play. Anyway, to begin with, the only time you have a chance to see the Angels play is in the playoffs, and they never make the playoffs. And not only do they make the playoffs, Al, not only do they not make the playoffs, they don't even come close to the playoffs. They're winning they win 70 to 75 games every year like clockwork. They never ever compete for a playoff spot. They brought Brad Ausmus in as a manager, which I never understood that, by the way. They brought back Madden. None of this is working. They can't build. I mean, it's like the Chicago Bears of the 60s couldn't build around Dick Butkus and Gale Sayers, for God's sakes. These guys can't build around Ohtani and Trout to save their souls. I don't get it. So my jerk of the week are the Angels for once again robbing us of these brilliant, talented players like Trout and Ohtani, and they surround them with a bunch of knuckleheads. And then there again, let's see, what's the record so far this year? The Angels are, bear with me here. The Angels are, as we speak, they are 73-87. Here we go again.
Yep.
73-87. They fired Madden when he was 27-29. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah. I can't argue with you. I just looked it up. Mike Trout played in 3 playoff games at the age of 22.
Right.
And he hasn't been back.
Right.
That's hard to believe.
And he signed contract.
He's still under contract for 8 more seasons.
Oh God.
At like almost $40 million per, I believe. What is it? $37.1 million for the next
what?
9 seasons.
I'm kind of mad at him too because doesn't he want to win? What's going through his mind?
And that has always been a question about Trout. If you want to win, why did you stay?
I would love to see his. Maybe I should go back and look it up. What his quotes were when he signed that extension with the Angels. He couldn't possibly, with a straight face, say, "Well, I believe what we're building here with the Angels." He can't say that. What does he? There's no. I mean, the money thing. He could have gotten that money anywhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't just.
Every team in baseball would have gave him a blank check. Yeah.
Oh my God! Back up the Brinks truck, for God's sakes. Oh.
You know what is also funny is that Ohtani signed a $30 million deal to avoid arbitration. He's still underpaid.
Right. Oh, for sure.
He's literally a Cy Young quality pitcher and an MVP quality batter.
Right.
He should be being paid $50 or $60 million because he's essentially 2 all-stars combined into one salary. But Ohtani he's likely going to stay in the West Coast, but he needs to go to like L.A. or something like that.
And I took some heat when I wrote that piece on Trout because I got some people commenting saying, "What do you want? You want everybody to play for the Angels? I mean, the Dodgers want everybody to play for the Yankees?" I said, "No, you don't have to. You don't have to be on the Angels. I keep saying the Angels. You don't have to be on the Dodgers or the Yankees to be in the playoffs. You can. There are other organizations that you can sign with." They give you a reasonable Atlanta, a reasonable shot at being in the playoffs.
San Diego.
Right.
As you mentioned, the Phillies are back in the playoffs. Exactly.
Oh my God.
I'm with you there, Greg.
Jeez.
I'm with. I could say let's make the Angels your jerk of the week. Let's throw a little shade at Mike Trout.
Yeah.
All right. My jerk of the week. I sometimes get controversial, sometimes get political with my jerk of the week, but. I'm going to go – my jerk of the week is going to be ESPN Networks, but not for any of the reasons like that. My jerk of the week with ESPN is because of how they're treating the Aaron Judge home run chase. They're cutting in live in the middle of college football games, and as someone put it, you're cutting into a game I deeply care about. I say like an Alabama fan. Mm-hmm. You're cutting into this game so I can watch – Aaron Judge become the seventh best home run season in baseball history. He's going to have the AL record, the Yankees record. Big deal.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a hell of an achievement for Judge.
Right.
But if someone wants to see it, it ain't hard to find. You go the MLB Network will be carrying it. Yeah. You can find, you go to damn Twitter, you go to Facebook, they'll be carrying it live at places like that online somewhere.
Right.
But to cut in because I saw it myself when I was flipping games on Saturday, and in the middle, you're watching this. You say you're caught up in an SEC football game,
right?
And then Aaron Judge comes on. They go to double box, and they cut off the volume to the football game, and they go and I hear Michael fucking K. Jesus Christ, what the hell are they thinking?
I didn't know they did that.
It is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, like Joe Sixpack, in buttfuck Alabama, who's a huge Bama fan, Roll Tide.
Right.
Do you really think he cares about the New York Yankees and Aaron Judge's maybe getting the number 62, which he did hit finally tonight? My phone blew up in the middle of the show. He did hit. He started the second game of the doubleheader in Texas with a home run. He's got 62. Thank fucking God. Now we can stop hearing from Roger Maris Jr. as well. With his, that's the real record was my dad's.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? Yeah. That's so ironic that Roger Maris Jr. would be saying, "Oh, that's the real record. My dad's got the real record," when his own dad was fighting off the same.
Exactly, because he did the 161 instead of 154. Exactly. That's an awesome point that you need to make. We need to drive home more often to run. This whole home run chase. They're trying to recreate what happened with Sosa and McGuire, a decade and a half ago. Right. That ain't never going to happen again. And I wish that, this is where when people scream about East Coast bias in sports media.
Right.
This is East Coast bias in sports media when you have ESPN based out of Connecticut who absolutely think the entire nation gives a shit about Aaron Judge hitting 62 home runs.
Well, they still show the Yankees and the Red Sox every Sunday.
Yes, exactly.
Every Sunday night.
Fox is guilty of that too. Thank God the playoffs are starting. It's like at least I can see teams like Atlanta and the Phillies and the Rays and and the Seattle. I'm looking forward to seeing Seattle.
Yeah, right.
Which now means, remember, that the two teams with the longest MLB playoff drought are the two we just talked about, the Tigers and the Angels.
Yeah.
So,
all
right, let's get the hell out of here, Greg. Get up the thank yous and plugs and what else we have going on. So
Sure, absolutely. First, Ron Mott, thanks to Ron for being here and doing that and putting up with me for that time that he was here. We appreciate that. And check him out at Ron Mott.
I've been putting up with you for 13 years.
Ron's Twitter is at Ron Mott. His Sportsopoly Twitter is at Sportsopoly, so that's easy enough.
And link all that in the show notes.
Yep, and the link to the article that we were talking about will be in there as well. I want to remind everybody to follow me on Twitter at Greg Dino and say hi to me there or take me to task there. My WordPress Out of Bounds blog is is available to you every Monday. Check that out. And also, of course, thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday night so gosh darn fun. And next time we're together on the 18th, we'll be joined by our resident NBA and Pistons guru, City Hall, who will take us through, lead us up to opening night.
Who always has some interesting takes, at the very least. Yes.
Absolutely. And he brings his analytical mind to our NBA discussion, and we'll do that on the 18th as we get ready for the opening of the NBA season, regular season on the 18th. So check that out. Yeah,
exactly. We got the Pistons will be starting their season, and also the Red Wings are in training camp as well. They're actually playing some exhibition games. And, we'll have lots more to talk about other than yelling about the Lions for an hour. Thank goodness. Or complaining about Miguel Cabrera for 15 minutes. So. All right. Now, I want to give a shout-out to Bean, who did make an appearance early on in the show. He was overjoyed that Ron was on with us. We give a shout-out to Linda, who is working in the air tonight. I'll see her in a couple nights when we go back up to the cabin. And also, Greg, a shout-out to you for finding all these fun guests, and because you harassed them on Twitter, apparently. All right, with that, let's get the hell out of here. Like I said, we'll have City Hall on in 2 weeks. We'll have lots of business talk. I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit of Red Wings as well. And we'll be able to have a Tigers post-mortem. We'll have the Major League Baseball playoffs, and, of course, as always, Lions football. So it'll be a lot to talk about. Hell, who knows what's going to happen in college football in the next 2 weeks as well. Because things are imploding in East Lansing while they're undefeated in Ann Arbor. So we'll have lots to talk about in 2 weeks. But until that time, we'll be doing our best to, I just say this, we'll do our best to keep giving you entertaining shows. So until then, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.